Take me out to the ball game. The baseball team battled Rio Grande over the weekend. Find out how the Pioneers did against one of the top teams in the RSC. Just Dance later on, I'll be joined by Point Park's cheer and dance team captain, Kimberly Keege, to talk about how the team performed at the NAIA national competition. And Show Me the Money later in the show, our reporters will debate which athlete was the most overrated free agency signing of all time in professional sports. It's time to come on down to the Pioneer Sideline. Good evening and welcome to the Pioneer Sideline. I'm Mike Turk. The baseball team has dropped out of the nationally ranked spot after their trip to Florida. They traveled to Rio Grande, Ohio over the weekend for a 3-game series against the Red Storm, who are currently receiving votes for a top 25 spot in the NAIA. To discuss how the Pioneers played in Ohio, we welcome in Taylor Spirito. Taylor, you got to tell us, how did the Pioneers look against the Red Storm?
So the first game was on Saturday, and they did end up dropping that game, but this team came back with a vengeance. Game 1 on Sunday, they won 10-6, and then game 2 on Sunday, they won 7-4. Like I said, they did drop that first game, but they still came out of Ohio with a series win, and they had great work from their starting pitchers and the bullpen alike. They just were overall so dominant on Sunday, and it was so cool to see them compete that well against, like you said, such a well-recognized and good team.
Now, they picked up a series win against West Virginia Tech to start off the season a couple weeks ago. Now they pick up this one, a 2-1 series win against Rio Grande. So what are these series wins saying about this team so far and their character?
So they did drop out of a nationally ranked spot, but to win against two teams who are so critically acclaimed in that sense, it's going to do so much for their mentality and for their gameplay. If they can see that they're competing against these top-ranked teams and they're putting up as big of a fight as they are, coming out with these series wins, that's going to do big things for their mentality going forward and just the standard that they're going to hold themselves to.
Now, looking at the standings in the RSC, you got Kokomo at 5-0, IU Southeast, and Point Park are both at 4-2 to round out your top 3 spots. So who do you think is going to pose one of the largest threats in the River States Conference? Do you think it's still the Pioneers who could run this conference, or do you think another kind of dark horse team could run it this year?
I mean, last year, the Point Park was so great in their game. They surprised everyone, and they just really came out and showed what Point Park baseball is. Now, Kokomo is undefeated right now in RSC. They're 5-0, and you always got to watch out for those types of teams. It is early in the season still, so things could turn around very quickly, but you still got to be on the lookout for that. And the fact that we are so close with IU Southeast, I could see this going toward the end of the series, or toward the end of the season, being such a tight race between the two of us.
Now, they've only played 14 games so far, but what are some early season thoughts you're having about this team?
So the games on Sunday were such high-scoring games. That not only proves that their offense is wonderful, but their defense is great as well. They had 42 hits in the 3 games over this weekend, and they had 13 hits and 4 walks in the 10-6 game. Rio Grande did have 6 errors, so that definitely played a role in it, but this, especially the Rio Grande series, proved that this is such a well-rounded team, and they can really hold their own in a conference that has such high caliber opponents. So I'm really excited to see what they're going to do as the series as the season progresses. You know, the weather gets a little warmer. Cold weather always kind of puts a little damper on everyone's game, so I'm excited to see what they're going to do in the coming months.
Now let's transition over to the softball field. Now the team is having their first home game this coming Wednesday. It was supposed to be tonight, actually. Well, this afternoon, I should say. Moved to tomorrow at 3 o'clock. But this team over a week ago was in the sunshine state of Florida. It was real nice, playing a couple of games. And then they had to come back up to Pittsburgh. They had a week off, but not the best weather to train in, though, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But let's look forward to this game tomorrow against Gannon University, a college up near where you're from, your neck of the woods. So what are some things you're looking for tomorrow?
Well, I know a few girls that play on Gannon's team. They've always been fairly good, but I think Point Park can have can give them a little bit of a competition. It is a non-conference game, but it's going to be a good competition for Point Park, especially coming out of Florida. Gannon is a D2 school that's pretty much equivalent to NAIA. And like I said, they've always been such good competition for Point Park. So this is really going to prove where they stand coming out of Florida and just where they can go from here.
Now, what do you think having a week off for the Pioneers is like, especially coming back up here? We were told that they've had to bounce around from different training facilities, and just because the weather conditions have been terrible in Pittsburgh recently. So what do you think, like, not being able to go outside and really practice there for a week does to the mentality of a team and how they train getting ready for their next match?
Well, I know that they've been in the cages a lot, getting some batting practice in, but they have gone outside for the past 2 days. The weather has been not the best, but enough to get those little practices in and get used to not only the cold, but the wind. As someone who's played softball before, you know, you always want to try to get outside as much as you can, especially in the beginning of the season. You want to get those reps in while it's cold and while it's windy, just to get used to it. But obviously there's going to be a big difference between playing in Pennsylvania, especially up near the lake, and playing in Florida. You know, it's just going to be so different. So I'm really excited to see what these Pioneers are going to do to go against Gannon.
Now, a source told me this week that Katie Tarr has been bumped up to the number 2 in the rotation. So what are you thinking? How's this going to play out for the team? And a pretty solid rotation to begin with, but what do you think bumping a pitcher up from the number 3 spot up to the number 2 spot in the starting rotation is going to do?
Oh, it's going to do wonders for the Pioneers. It's huge. I mean, you know, for her personally, going from number 3 to number 2, she's obviously going to want to impress in that sense. But she won Pitcher of the Week while they were in Florida. And then in 2018, she had 20 appearances, 10 starts. She had 120 strikeouts and a 1.89 ERA. Now in 2019, she's had 4 starts with 32 strikeouts and an ERA of 2.40. She has a very prominent rise ball, I've noticed, and a really prominent changeup as well whenever she nails it. So I'm excited to see what she's going to be able to do. I think that she's really going to impress here. So be on the lookout for her, and I think she's just going to do great.
And final question for you, Taylor. What are some things you think this team needs to improve on prior to starting some RSC play?
So one thing, and this doesn't just go for the softball team, but it goes for any sport, communication is going to be key, especially, you know, players all around. It's not as condensed as, say, you know, a basketball court or even a football field where everyone's kind of together to start out with. Everyone's all spread out, so they've got to work on communicating, make sure that they're heard. They also have to improve their small ball and tighten up their defense. You know, we saw in the game against Rio Grande for the baseball, you know, they had 6 errors, and that really let Point Park run away with that game. So if Point Park's softball team can tighten up their defense and get those errors down, they had 3 errors in multiple Florida games. And then they also have a really young roster with only 4 seniors, and 2 of them are pitchers. So I really want to see their communication improve first. Obviously, they've got great chemistry as a team already, but if they can get that communication fine-tuned, I think that they're going to do great.
All right, Taylor, thank you so much for pulling double duty on that today. Now, after the break, I will be joined by Point Park's dance captain, Kimberly Keege, to talk more about the team and their trip to Iowa. Then later, we'll update you on what the Pittsburgh Pirates have been up to while in Bradenton, Florida. We'll be right back.
All right, we're ready.
Oh, no. You are right here.
Is the wind really necessary, guys? We need the wind. Okay.
You go today. It's awful. Yeah. Awful.
Okay, I need someone to make me laugh.
Where's Wyatt? Wyatt's always late, duh.
I'm here. Jealous?
Get out of my way. Stop.
Cool. Okay. And now we're smiling. There's a lot of noise going on. Let's keep the background.
3, 2, 1.
Here at the Pioneer Sideline.
We covered the real sports. another season. The Penguins are just getting started with the regular season this week.
Pioneer Sideline.
The show that starts your Friday mornings has returned with both familiar and new faces. Daybreak host Taylor Fife and Delaney Bomas are bringing you the latest updates in Pittsburgh and Point Park news. We also have a variety of talent on our free segments. Whether it be singing, dancing, or indeed egg smashing. Start your mornings with us at Daybreak on UView at UView Television.
Welcome back. The dance team placed second of 8 teams at the NAIA Northeast Region Qualifier back on February 23rd. Then after a few weeks of preparation, the team had a chance to compete at the NAIA National Championship this past Friday and Saturday. I am now joined by the captain of the dance team, Kimberly Keegi, to tell us more about her experience at Nationals, as well as what's next for the dance team. Kim, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
Thanks, Mike, for having me tonight.
Now, can you just tell us a little bit about that preparation leading up to the national tournament there?
Sure. So we start our season in September, actually, with conditioning. So we start prepping for the national championship if we get the large bid all the way back in September. So it's a long months of preparation, but leading up to the finals, we have long night practices, usually 3 hours a night. We practice from 8 to 11, Monday through Thursday. And then on Sunday, if we aren't competing, we'll be having practice then too. So it's a long road ahead, but.
Now, you just mentioned long road. You had a long road to Iowa. Just real quick, can you tell us how long did it take you to get out there? Because that's crazy to go all the way out there.
It took us 9 hours, and we drove in SUVs, so we were a little tightly packed, but that's okay.
All right, now going on to the NAIA National Tournament there. You guys placed 8th there in the competition. Now, what were some personal reactions from yourself and the team as well? Where you girls finished? Were you like, oh, that's good, or were you a little disappointed where you finished? What were your reactions?
Well, last year we had gotten the chance to go when we placed 4th, but moving into this year for 2019, we were in a tough spot. We were first to go in prelims, which is what they judge the rest of the competition off of, and that's kind of the starting baseline. So it was a little tricky, and we had a tough spot, and we ended up finishing 8th. And we were a little disappointed, but we knew going in that we had a tough spot, and we did our best routine on the floor that day on Friday, and I think we were overall satisfied of how hard we really worked for that spot.
Okay, what was the routine, if you don't mind me asking? Was it something we saw at the basketball games this past season?
No, we actually only debuted our competition routine at 1 basketball game this season. But if you go on to the NAIA, you can live stream competitions from the past. This year our routine was 80s themed, and we did Bust a Move and Material Girls, so it was kind of fun and funky.
Now, you're a junior. You said you're graduating this coming December.
Yes.
In a little while, but you've been with the Point Park dance program ever since they started back in 2016-2017 season when they got recognized as a collegiate sport here at Point Park. Now, what has been your experience here for the Point Park dance team, and how have you seen it progress over these couple years?
Well, I was part of the first recruiting class that was coming in for incoming freshmen to be on the dance team as a varsity sport. And I can tell you in the 3 years that we've been a varsity sport, we've come miles. We've had a lot of our first season, we didn't get a bid to nationals, and to get a bid in our second and third year is really a great accomplishment for us. And you can just tell that the sport really is becoming loved by other people, and we're getting a lot of recruits for next season already. So.
Oh, that's good. Local recruits at all, or are they coming from all over?
They come kind of from all over. So right now we'll have our recruiting clinic on the 23rd of March, and that's where athletes can learn the routines for the tryout dance, and they can meet former coaches and former athletes and have a Q&A session with them.
Okay, now how long have you been dancing for? Has it been something you've been doing since you were a child, and is it something you knew you wanted to continue to do as a collegiate sport here?
So I started dancing when I was 2, and it's been a passion of mine forever.
Most people walk at that age. I just want you to know. Damn, wow.
So I started dancing at 2, and I found a passion for it, and I found that that's what drove me. And honestly, dance has taught me a lot of great life skills like team management, time management. And then I had looked and tried to audition for college, but I found that it just wasn't my path, and I wanted to get more into broadcasting actually. So Point Park had a dance team, and that was perfect because it was something I could do as a creative outlet for fun and kind of to de-stress from school. So.
Now, you're graduating in December, as I mentioned already, but what are some things you would like to see this team potentially emulate from this past year's team, and what are some things you would like to see implemented into next semester's dance team?
So next semester, I would like us to move forward and start dancing more as a team. It's hard because this year we lost a lot of our good seniors from last year, so we were basically a brand new team, and we had a lot of young freshman recruits. Moving forward, our freshman recruits have really proven themselves, and I think they'll be great team players, and I think they're very strong leaders on our team. So taking them and allowing them to introduce themselves to the new incoming freshmen for the new class, it'll really help the team progress and dance more as a whole.
Now, we have to go to break here real short, but I have to ask you, congratulations, Student Athlete of the Month of February. What did that mean to get that recognition there?
It was really an honor. Cheer and dance is not a sport that's often seen as a sport, so to be recognized as the Student Athlete of the Month, I was really blessed.
Well, Kim, thank you so much for coming on tonight. We really appreciate it. Now, when we come back, we'll have all the details on the latest news in Pittsburgh and national sports. Then later, we bring back everyone's favorite segment, Case of the Week. Oh, we've got a fun one planned tonight, so don't go anywhere.
I know just the trick. Bippity, boppity, boop! Much better. Guys, Samir Nesby, and I'm outside of the Benedum Center right now. So in just a few moments, we're going to go inside the Benedum Center to talk to Trevor Dion Nicholas, who plays the genie in Disney's Aladdin. I'm Samir Nesby giving you the theatrical scoop for the Berg. Hey guys, so I'm now inside the Benedum Center with Trevor Dion Nicholas, who plays the genie in Disney's Aladdin.
Welcome back. All three major sports teams here in Pittsburgh have stirred up a lot of news lately. From the Antonio Brown trade drama, the Penguins on the ice, and the Pirates swinging away down in Florida, there's a lot of sports news to cover. So we bring in Robert Berger to give us all of the details. Rob.
Thank you, Mike. The drama is finally over here in Steeler Nation. All right, I'm sorry about that.
You can count yourself back in again.
All right, 3, 2. Thank you, Mike. The drama is finally over here in Steeler Nation, and Antonio Brown has found a new home. That's right. This past week, after denying a trade offer from the Buffalo Bills, the wide receiver was officially traded to the Oakland Raiders. In return, the Steelers will receive a 3rd and a 5th-round draft pick in the 2019 NFL Draft. The Steelers also made a deal with center Marquise Pouncey, paying him $11 million per year for the next 3 years, and this makes Pouncey the highest-paid center in the National Football League. Over on the Diamond, the Pirates are still in Bradenton, Florida for spring training. On the spring season, the team holds a 7-11 record and are currently sitting on a 6-game losing streak. Recently, in a game against the Minnesota Twins, the infield turned a rare 6-3-5 triple play. The team's entering the season with one of the best pitching rotations in recent years and will have their first regular season game coming up on March 28th against the Cincinnati Reds. And on the ice, the Pittsburgh Penguins ended the Boston Bruins' 19-game point streak after defeating the team Sunday at home to a 4-2 score. The team has been battling injury as of late, and Chris Letang, who was injured against the Philadelphia Flyers during the Stadium Series game, is practicing but wearing a non-contact jersey. Zach Aston Reese was recently injured during the game against the Bruins and was not on the ice during this morning's morning skate, according to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. In return, Josh Blandansky has been called up to fill in for the meantime. Thank you, Mike. Back to you.
Thanks, Rob. Now, the NFL is in full off-season mode, with teams coming to verbal agreements with some of the hottest free agents on the market. For more details on NFL free agency, as well as information on the NBA and NASCAR, we welcome in Colton Tobias. Colton.
Thank you so much, Mike. There has been a lot of NFL trades the buzz around the league lately after the Antonio Brown deal went down this past week. Some of the big names so far are Patriots offensive lineman Trent Brown, who was traded to the Raiders in a $66 million deal. Giants safety Landon Collins signed with the Redskins in an $84 million deal. And former Super Bowl MVP Nick Foles signed an $88 million deal with the Jaguars. There should be a lot more blockbuster deals to come as free agency officially opens tomorrow. Moving to hockey, the Tampa Bay Lightning are the first team to clinch a playoff spot for the Stanley Cup playoffs as they now sit with over a 15-point advantage in league standings and will most likely be the President's Trophy recipient this year. For the first time in their history. The NBA playoffs are also going to be here soon as the Milwaukee Bucks and the Toronto Raptors are the only teams to clinch playoff spots so far. There was also another milestone set last week for LeBron James as he passed his boyhood idol Michael Jordan for 4th place on the NBA's all-time scoring list at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. This could, however, be LeBron's first time missing the playoffs in over 14 years as the Lakers sit 7.5 games back from a playoff spot. This would be the first time LeBron would miss out on the NBA Finals as well since 2010. And finally, Kyle Busch won the NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series race in Phoenix on Sunday, claiming his 199th win in all 3 of NASCAR's Premier Series.
Well, thanks, Colton. Now, when we come back after the break, we'll be debating some of the most overrated free agency signings in the history of sports. It's a case of the week debate you won't want to miss, so don't go anywhere.
The United Student Government at Point Park University, working since the 1970s to solve the issues that matter to you. What concerns do you have about the university? Student life, safety, food service? Send us an email to studentconcerns@pointpark.edu or stop by our office on the 7th floor of the Student Center. You can also attend our weekly open meetings on Mondays at 3:15. Follow us on social media at USG_PPU for more. The United Student Government, by the students, for the students.
The Point Park Sports Network, bringing you live coverage of Pioneer Athletics on Stretch Internet, the home of the River States Conference and the NAIA. Subscribe today for complete access to the Point Park volleyball, baseball, basketball, and soccer teams. Watch live and on-demand broadcasts, and don't miss a minute of Point Park Athletics. Head to pointparksports.com/live for broadcast listings. The Point Park Sports Network, your streaming home for Point Park Athletics.
3, 2, 1.
Please visit our website. Please. It's a nice website. Please visit our website. Please.
If you have ever watched television, whether accidentally or on purpose, YouView is for you.
Welcome back. Over the years, some sports franchises have spent the big bucks in order to land a big-name superstar. Some have paid off, and others have been complete bust. But which signing was the most overrated one of all time? For tonight's Case of the Week, we welcome in Taylor Spirito and Colton Tobias for this topic. Colton, we came up with this late last week. We pulled an audible on this one because I forget how it came up Thursday night, but we want to talk about overrated free agency signings. So before we get into your actual picks, I want you guys to share what were some that were bouncing around your mind at first.
So the first thing that popped into my head, regrettably, was Erik Karlsson, because he just signed this past, he just got acquired by the Sharks this past offseason. But I wouldn't call it the biggest bust of all time, just because it is his first season with the Sharks, and he's still a great defenseman, but they just haven't done as well as they expected to with him, likes of Joe Thornton, Pavelski, Brent Burns. They just haven't really capitalized on the fact that they have all those powerhouses together. But I wouldn't call it the biggest bust of all time.
Okay, Colton, who do you have?
Well, first of all, Turk, I want to say, if Bryce Harper or Manny Machado do not work out in Philadelphia or San Diego, I think that's going to go down as the biggest bust of all time, because I think they were a little overpaid, but that's another story for another day.
It's just baseball.
Yes.
Yeah, that's like another story for another day. But my pick will probably have to be Brock Osweiler. He is mostly remembered for, some people say that he led the Broncos to Super Bowl 50, before Peyton Manning took over, and then in the offseason, the Houston Texans signed him to a huge deal, and it did not work out. He was already gone in a year. So that was my first thought.
Yeah, he's been bouncing around.
I know that he's in Miami. He was in Cleveland and then Miami.
He was in Cleveland. I was there.
Peyton's farewell season. I bought the tickets to the Steelers and Broncos game to go watch Peyton early in that season. Peyton got hurt, so I had to watch Osweiler. Turned out to be a great game. I still don't like Brock Osweiler for keeping me from seeing my favorite quarterback of all time. Anyways, let's move on. Who do you have for the most overrated free agent of all time? Not in recent history, but all time.
So I have Sean Avery. He signed with the Dallas Stars for a 4-year deal worth $15.5 million on average. He only had 3 goals and 10 points in 23 games. What happened with him was he deliberately made rude and sexually suggestive comments to reporters in Calgary about an opposing player who was dating his ex-girlfriend. This caused the NHL to suspend him, and then after the suspension, Dallas ended up putting him on waivers, and he got claimed by the New York Rangers. That was only a few months later. He didn't even get to spend a full season, and for that amount of money in this cap era, I would consider it one of the biggest busts of all time.
Okay, very interesting. Of course you went with hockey.
Of course I went with hockey. Of course he went with football.
That's
right,
Taylor.
of course.
That's right. Well, I just really don't know about mine because he's only been on his team for 1 year, but I'm going with my gut on this one and picking Kirk Cousins with the Minnesota Vikings. Now, if you're a football fan, you know all too well that last year the Minnesota Vikings got rid of Case Keenum, Teddy Bridgewater, and Sam Bradford to get Kirk Cousins from the Washington Redskins in an $84 million deal. Now, when I heard about this trade going down, I was like, just why? There was no need for Minnesota to go out and get him. They were coming off a 13-3 season, losing in the NFC Championship game to the potential Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. And you have Case Keenum, a quarterback that led you to the playoffs, led you to an AFC North title, and you suddenly get rid of him in a system that he works so great in, and then you just ship him off to Denver, and you get Cousins with, if you look at his numbers, he has a 5-24 record against winning teams. He was 1-for-5 in winning teams last season. He has a road record of 37-23-2, a primetime game record of 5-13, and an 0-7 record on Monday Night Football. And he only had 1 playoff appearance with the Washington Redskins. So I just think there was no need to go out and get Cousins, signing him to a $84 million deal, and the Vikings finished the season 8-7-1 and missing the playoffs.
So I guess you're not drafting him in fantasy football anytime
Absolutely
soon.
not, Turk. Absolutely not, Turk.
Now, if you guys had to go with like a sort of second pick here, would you still stick with somebody from hockey? And I'm gonna be honest. What year was the guy on your list signed as?
I honestly don't recall. I didn't even write it down, so that's my bad. But it was a while ago, not really in recent history. But Erik Karlsson was, and like I said, I wouldn't really go with him. But I agree with Brock Osweiler actually. As someone who is a Cleveland fan, I was very disappointed with him when I saw him at training camp back in, 2017?
2017,
yeah. He was very tall. But I was very disappointed in the fact that he didn't do anything for us. Obviously, now we have Baker Mayfield, so it's not that big of a deal. But I do agree with that pick for Brock Osweiler.
Now, personally, I think I would have went with DeMarco Murray when he made the move from Dallas to Philadelphia, because that was just a big bust after a great year. But guys, thank you so much for coming on tonight's episode of the Pioneer Sideline. I'm sure we'll have you on again, probably next week or sometime soon at least. So that's all the time we have for this week, unfortunately, but be sure to join us next week at the same Pioneer time, the same Pioneer channel, and of course, the same Pioneer Sideline.